He came in quietly. No entourafe, no flash chisut, just a neat button-up, faded jeans, and shoes that had clearly walked more miles than most men at that bank would ever know. Clarence didn't look like money, and that's exactly why the room ignored him. It was a Friday afternoon, the kind where the air feels thick, the clocks slow down, and everyone just wants to be somewhere else. People shifted in line, checking phones, staring at the floor. One woman huffed loud enough for 3 people. Another man, in a golf polo, tapped his fingers on the counter like that might speed up time. But Clarence? He just stood still, third in line, holding a worn manila folder close to his chest like it mattered. Because to him, it did. Inside that folder was everything he had worked for. The lease agreement, the zoning permits, the final loan approval from the corporate office. 10 years of running a mechanic shop, paying off debts, building credit, all for this. His second location, a dream finally within reach. He just needed the manager to sign off the last verification, and he would have been done in 10 minutes. If not for the man behind the desk. Alan Prescott, the branch manager, 42, white, crisp navy suit. Hair so gelled it didn't move when he turned his head. He walked like he owned the floor, smiled like he charged for it, and had a reputation for protecting the bank from bad risks. That was his code, his polite way of saying he liked to keep certain clients in check. When Clarence stepped up to the counter, Alan didn't greet him, didn't look up right away, just glanced at the folder, then back down at his computer. Name? Alan asked flatly. Clarence Boone, he replied. Calm, respectful. Alan paused. His eyes slowly lifted, scanning Clarence from shoes to collar. Noticing the dark skin, the rough hands, the faint grease mark near the cuff that even Clarence hadn't noticed. And what exactly can I help you with? Alan asked, his tone already colder. Clarence opened the folder and passed it forward. This branch was listed as the final step for funding. Just need this verification processed, and I'm all set. Everything's in there. Corporate's already approved it. Alan took the folder with 2 fingers, barely opened it. His eyes didn't land on a single document. I see, he said, closing the folder before really reviewing anything. And you're opening a shop? Yes, sir, Clarence nodded. My second one, actually, this time on Eastfield Road. Bigger location. I've been working with your commercial division. They said I just needed. Right, Alan interrupted. The pause hung awkwardly. The room behind Clarence carried on. The line grew. The buzz of muted conversations filled the space. Alan stood up, folder still in hand. Give me a few minutes. Clarence nodded again. Of course. He stepped aside, moving toward the waiting chairs, never slouching, never scowling. He was used to being patient. Alan disappeared into the office behind the counter. But what Clarence didn't see, what no one did, was the way Alan dropped the folder on the desk like it was trash. Then he picked up his phone, not to call corporate, not to verify anything, but to scroll. He wasn't working on the case at all. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Clarence waited. A younger teller, a Latino woman named Justine, glanced at him from behind the glass partition. She noticed how still he sat, hands folded, eyes forward. She knew Alan was stalling. Everyone who worked there did. But she also knew better than to say something in front of him. Alan came back finally, folder in hand, still unopened. Mr. Boone, he called out. Clarence stood quickly, hopeful. Alan didn't even look at him. I'm sorry, but we're going to need to reschedule this appointment. I don't have time to process this today. Clarence blinked. I'm sorry. Alan finally faced him again. You'll need to come back. Maybe next week. This isn't the kind of thing we just rubber stamp. Clarence stepped forward, still calm. Sir, with respect, this isn't a rubber stamp. I've already gone through corporate. This is the last stop. They told me to come here. Today. Alan's jaw flexed slightly. And I'm telling you I'm not comfortable processing this at this time. A few heads turned. The volume in the room dipped. Clarence kept his voice low. Is there a reason why? Alan raised a brow. We reserve the right to refuse processing until everything has been thoroughly reviewed. And quite frankly, this file looks incomplete. Now Clarence's tone shifted slightly. Not angry, but firmer. With respect again, you haven't read the file. Alan's eyes narrowed. Excuse me, I watched you. You didn't open the folder before leaving. I timed it. You were gone 20 minutes. The full file can be read in 10. I know. I compiled it. Behind them, silence began to settle. A man 3 spots back in line leaned forward. A woman near the corner pulled out her phone, screen quietly pointed forward. Alan's face turned slightly red. Mr. Boone, I'm going to ask you to leave. Because I asked for fair processing? Because you're being aggressive. Clarence stood still. No, sir. I'm being clear. Alan raised a hand towards security. That's when Justine, the teller, finally stepped forward. Sir, she said, voice low, maybe we should just process his paperwork. I can help. Alan didn't even look at her. You can help by staying in your lane. Clarence turned toward the door, gathering his composure. But before he could speak, the lobby doors opened, and everything stopped. A tall man entered. Gray suit, polished shoes, quiet but commanding energy. Eyes sharp, not from arrogance, but from authority. The kind of man whose presence made people straighten their backs without realizing why. Alan glanced up, and his expression changed instantly. Clarence didn't turn yet. He was still focused on standing his ground with dignity. But Justine, she recognized the man. Her jaw dropped slightly, because the man walking in was Walter Langston, Chief Executive Officer of the entire banking network. And he wasn't smiling. The CEO didn't announce himself. He didn't need to. Walter Langston had the kind of presence that spoke louder than any introduction. 6'3", silver hair, trimmed neat, posture like he'd served in the military, because he had. Before banking, before boardrooms, Walter had worn a uniform and learned to read rooms before speaking. In the room right now, it was speaking loud. Clarence hadn't turned yet. He was still facing Alan, still holding his ground. But he felt the shift, the weight in the air, that quiet pause that follows power. Walter didn't head to the private offices. He walked straight toward the lobby desk. Slow, measured, intentional. Alan finally found his voice. And Mr. Langston, sir, I didn't know you'd be visiting this branch today. Walter didn't return the greeting. His eyes were already on Clarence. You didn't need to know, he said evenly. I don't make my unannounced visits public. Clarence turned now. He froze. He knew the name Langston. He'd seen it printed across corporate letters. The man's photo in press articles. But seeing him in person? That wasn't in the plan. Alan was still stammering. If I'd known, I would have. You would have what? Walter asked. I was not leaving Clarence. Clean the windows? Or treated your customers with the respect they deserve? Alan blinked. Sir, I was just. Walter raised one finger. Not yelling, just halting the nonsense. He turned to Clarence. Mr. Boone. Clarence nodded slowly. Yes, sir. May I see your folder, please? Clarence handed it over without a word. Walter flipped it open. The pages weren't new to him. He'd reviewed the Boone case himself weeks ago. Clarence's request for expansion had come across his desk as part of a spotlight initiative to support small business owners with stellar records. Boone's file had stood out immediately, not just because of numbers, but because of character. He remembered the handwritten letter attached to the file. I don't want a handout. I want a chance. Walter turned a page, then another, then looked up. This is one of the most organized, thorough files I've seen this quarter. Alan shifted behind him, flustered. Sir, I hadn't had a chance to. Walter didn't even turn around. Don't lie to me, Alan. You've had 25 minutes. You wasted them. Clarence said nothing. The room said less. People were watching now. Subtle glances. Quiet stares. One man pulled his earbuds out. Another woman took out her phone, didn't even pretend she wasn't recording anymore. Walter looked directly at Alan. Why was this man denied service? Alan hesitated. We were just verifying. No, Walter interruptive. You dismissed him before reading a word. I know. I watched the cameras on my way in. Alan's jaw twitched. Sir, I didn't mean any offense. But offense was taken, Walter replied. Not because you were rude, but because you were unjust. He turned to Justine now. You offered to help, didn't you? She nodded, nervous. Yes, sir. And you were shut down? Yes, sir. Walter closed the folder slowly. Thank you. That's all I need to know. He turned back to Clarence, lowering his voice just enough that only a few around could hear. You didn't deserve this. Clarence met his eyes. I'm not looking for special treatment, sir. Just fairness. Walter nodded. And that's exactly what you'll get. He turned toward the office hallway and gestured to Justine. Please come with me. Let's process this right now. Mr. Boone, would you join us? Clarence followed. As they walked away, Walter stopped just short of the hallway and turned once more to Alan. Clarence's request for expansion had come across his desk as part of a spotlight initiative to support small business owners with stellar records. Boone's file had stood out immediately, not just because of numbers, but because of character. He remembered the handwritten letter attached to the file. I don't want a handout. I want a chance. Walter turned a page, then another, then looked up. This is one of the most organized, thorough files I've seen this quarter. Alan shifted behind him, flustered. Sir, I hadn't had a chance to. Walter didn't even turn around. Don't lie to me, Alan. You've had 25 minutes. You wasted them. Clarence said nothing. The room said less. People were watching now. Subtle glances. Quiet stares. One man pulled his earbuds out. Another woman took out her phone, didn't even pretend she wasn't recording anymore. Walter looked directly at Alan. Why was this man denied service? Alan hesitated. We were just verifying. No, Walter interruptive. You dismissed him before reading a word. I know. I watched the cameras on my way in. Alan's jaw twitched. Sir, I didn't mean any offense. But offense was taken, Walter replied. Not because you were rude, but because you were unjust. He turned to Justine now. You offered to help, didn't you? She nodded, nervous. Yes, sir. And you were shut down? Yes, sir. Walter closed the folder slowly. Thank you. That's all I need to know. He turned back to Clarence, lowering his voice just enough that only a few around could hear. You didn't deserve this. Clarence met his eyes. I'm not looking for special treatment, sir. Just fairness. Walter nodded. And that's exactly what you'll get. He turned toward the office hallway and gestured to Justine. Please come with me. Let's process this right now. Mr. Boone, would you join us? Clarence followed. As they walked away, Walter stopped just short of the hallway and turned once more to Alan. You'll stay here. Alan's mouth opened slightly. Effective immediately, your responsibilities at this branch are suspended. HR will be in touch. A soft gasp rippled through the room. Clarence didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just walked forward. Inside the manager's office, Walter held the door open for him. Justine followed, still a little stunned. She took a seat behind the desk, ready to input the information. Clarence sat across from her. Walter leaned against the file cabinet, arms crossed. This will only take a few minutes, he said quietly. Justine began typing. Her hands moved fast, familiar with the system. She verified documents, cross-checked signatures, and input final approvals. Walter stayed silent, watching, not hovering, just ensuring the process was finally being handled with the respect Clarence had always deserved. After 10 minutes, Justine looked up. That's it. Approved and finalized. You'll receive official documentation within 48 hours. Clarence exhaled, a long, slow breath that held years inside it. Thank you, he said. Walter nodded. You earned it. Clarence turned slightly in his chair. Can I ask, how did you know who I was? Walter pushed off the cabinet and walked over. You came across my desk a month ago. I was reviewing commercial loans and saw your name. Read your letter. I remembered it. He smiled faintly. I remember Goodman. Clarence's throat tightened, but he swallowed it down. Appreciate that, sir. Walter extended a hand. No need for sir. Walter is fine. Clarence stood and shook it. Outside, the room was quieter now. People still watched the closed door, murmuring among themselves. Alan sat in the corner, red-faced, hands clenched in his lap. When the door finally opened, Clarence stepped out first, followed by Walter, followed by Justine. And in that moment, everyone understood who mattered. Outside the bank, the Texas sun was starting to drop behind the rooftops, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Clarence stood near his pickup truck. It was clean but old, a '98 Ford he'd rebuilt himself years ago when he couldn't afford a new one. He rested one hand on the tailgate, breathing in the silence, eyes forward but not seeing the storefronts in front of him. He should have felt relief, should have felt victorious, but all he felt was tired, because this wasn't the first time, and he knew deep down, it wouldn't be the last. He'd walked into boardrooms and been mistaken for maintenance. He'd shaken hands with contractors who looked right past him to see who was in charge. He'd shown up early, stayed late, never complained, and still had to prove himself twice over just to be treated as average. What happened inside the bank. This wasn't new. What was new was someone finally stopping it. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. Just heavy. Behind him, the glass doors of the bank opened again. Walter Langston stepped outside, his coat now folded over one arm, tie loosened, expression thoughtful. He approached quietly. Clarence didn't turn until Walter was standing beside him. "Thought you might have driven off," Walter said. Clarence gave a faint smile. "I'm used to being shown the door, not walked to it." Walter nodded slowly. "I'm sorry for what happened in there. I can't undo it, but I can make sure it's not ignored." Clarence looked down at his boots. "Appreciate that." Walter studied him. "You didn't raise your voice once." Clarence shrugged. "Didn't need to." Walter smiled at that. "You're a better man than me." There was a pause. Then Clarence asked, "Can I be honest with you? Please." "I didn't expect anyone to step in. Not really. I've been overlooked so many times I stopped thinking justice was something that showed up. I just try to keep my head down and do right." Walter's voice softened. Doing right doesn't mean staying quiet, especially when silence lets the wrong kind of people keep winning. Clarence tilted his head. "You always say stuff like that? Or just on the days you fire people?" Walter chuckled. "Only when it counts." They stood like that for a moment, two men from different worlds, bound by the same idea. Dignity. Walter finally said, "We're hosting a regional conference next month. Small business leaders. Growth opportunities. I'd like you to be there." Clarence looked surprised. "You want me to speak? I want you to be seen." Clarence nodded, the weight on his chest beginning to lift. They shook hands again, not just in farewell, but in mutual respect. As Walter walked away, Clarence watched him go, not as a CEO, but as a man who didn't need applause to do the right thing. Back inside the bank, things were shifting. Alan Prescott sat alone in the break room, blinds half drawn, jaw clenched. His phone buzzed 3 times, HR, corporate, and his wife. He didn't answer any of them, because for the first time in a long time, he was the one being watched. Justine passed by the door but didn't stop. Neither did any of the tellers. People who had once feared him now walked past like he didn't exist. He hated it, but deep down, some part of him, the part that used to know better, understood he'd earned it. Out on the floor, customers lingered. A few whispered. One woman approached Justine's window, leaned in, and said quietly, "What he did, that was brave." Justine smiled, but it was tired. It was overdue. The woman nodded and walked off. That night, Clarence drove home with the windows down, letting the wind push the day away. He didn't blast music, didn't call anyone. He just drove. A quiet ride with nothing but the sound of tires on pavement and the weight of a day that nearly broke him. Until it didn't. At home, his youngest daughter met him at the door, hugging his waist without even asking how his meeting went. She didn't know about the confrontation, about the disrespect, about the CEO. She just knew her dad was home. Clarence kissed the top of her head and smiled. And in that moment, everything ugly from earlier faded, because what mattered truly was still intact. 2 days later, the video surfaced. Someone in the lobby had recorded it. The exchange, the refusal, the CEO stepping in. It started as a post on a local community page. Then it hit Twitter, then Reddit. Then national pages picked it up. CEO defends black entrepreneur from racist bank manager. Man denied service. Until corporate head shows up, comments flooded in. That manager didn't even try to hide it. Shout out to the CEO for showing up in person. Why is this still happening in 2025? Clarence Boone is a damn hero. Within 72 hours, the video had 4.3 million views. News outlets requested interviews. Clarence declined most. He didn't want fame, didn't want clicks, didn't need to go viral. But Walter? Walter called him personally and said, "You being seen changes more than you think." Clarence finally agreed to speak at the conference. And when he walked on stage a week later, in front of 800 people, business owners, bankers, board members. He didn't bring notes. He brought truth. Clarence stood at the side of the stage, waiting for his name to be called. He wasn't nervous, not in the way people usually are before public speaking. It wasn't stage fright. It wasn't anxiety. It was something else. It was the feeling of standing at the edge of a wave that had taken years to rise. This wasn't about going viral anymore. This was about telling the truth without apology. The announcer's voice came over the mic. Please welcome Clarence Boone, founder of Boone Custom Fabrication and recipient of this year's Integrity in Business Award. Applause echoed. It wasn't thunderous, but it was respectful, genuine. Clarence walked slowly to the podium. He didn't wear a tie. Didn't need to. Pressed shirt, clean jeans, polished boots. The same man who walked into that bank. The same man who was told he didn't belong. He adjusted the mic and waited for silence. When it came, he spoke simply. I didn't expect to be here. The room was still. I walked into a bank last week to apply for a loan. My file was solid. My numbers were right. And before the manager read a single page, he dismissed me. A murmur rippled through the audience, a mixture of discomfort and recognition. Clarence continued. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I didn't storm out. I just asked for fairness. He paused, and what happened next changed everything. He looked toward the front row, where Walter Langston sat, still, focused, arms folded like he was guarding something more important than money. Because someone powerful didn't stay quiet. Clarence went on, telling the room what they already knew from the headlines, but in a tone that no article had captured. Not sensational, not angry, just real. He told them about the look in Alan's eyes, the doubt, the dismissal. He told them about how many times that same look had followed him, how many doors had quietly closed, how many rooms had gone silent when he entered. I'm not here because I went viral, he said plainly. I'm here because I've been invisible for too long. The room was absolutely still now. Clarence leaned forward slightly. I don't want your sympathy. I don't even need your applause. I need you, all of you in positions of power, to stop pretending like this doesn't happen in your buildings. Several executives shifted uncomfortably. I'm not a mistake in the system. I'm the proof it needs fixing. A single clap started from the back, then another, and then the room erupted. Clarence didn't flinch. He gave a slight nod and stepped back. Walter rose from his seat. His eyes glistened faintly, not from emotion, but from pride. Not pride in himself. Pride in the man who had just spoken truth to power in a room full of people who needed to hear it. Later that evening, as the conference wound down, Walter caught up with Clarence in the hotel lobby. You said it better than I ever could, Walter said. Clarence smiled. I just told the truth. Walter nodded. That's exactly why it mattered. They sat for a while. No sweets, no mics. Just two men on a lobby bench while the world moved around them. Truth is, Walter said after a pause, I almost didn't intervene that day. Clarence turned. Why not? I've been trained, like a lot of corporate leaders, to stay behind the curtain, to protect the brand. Let PR handle it. He looked down at his hands. But the brand doesn't mean a damn thing if you can't look a man like you in the eye and say, this matters. Clarence nodded. Then, I'm glad you didn't stay behind the curtain. Walter chuckled. My assistant was furious. Clarence raised a brow. Really? She said if I'm going to go rogue and fire someone on the spot, I should at least wear a different tie. They both laughed. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't forced. It was relief. The kind of laughter that only comes when something real finally breaks through the noise. Back at the bank branch, change came fast. Alan Prescott was officially terminated within the week. HR sent a statement. The bank released a video acknowledging the incident and stating its commitment to equity and fair treatment. Most customers nodded along. A few rolled their eyes. Some pulled their accounts. But inside the building, the air was different. People noticed it. The whispers were gone. The fear had shifted, not toward terror, but toward accountability. Employees who used to keep their heads down now spoke up when something didn't sit right. And Justine? She got promoted. Branch assistant manager. First black woman to hold that title in her district. When she called Clarence to tell him, her voice shook. I don't think I would have had the courage to speak up if it weren't for you. Clarence's voice was calm. You always had it. You just needed someone to remind you. A week later, Clarence walked into a different bank branch, one closer to his shop. He wasn't applying for anything. He was depositing, a big one. His business, Boone Custom Fabrication, had seen a 37% spike in orders since the video. But more than that, investors were calling. People who had ignored his emails for years were now showing up to his shop with notebooks, cameras, and apologies. He didn't trust them all, but he listened, because now, finally, they were listening to him. The teller, a young woman with braids and braces, looked up at him with wide eyes. "Are you the guy from that video?" Clarence smiled. "Depends which one." "The bank one, where the CEO came in and had your back?" He chuckled. "Yeah, that was me." She grinned. "You're a legend around here." Clarence leaned on the counter. "Legend's a strong word." She slid his receipt across the glass. "You earned it." He looked at the numbers on the paper, then back at her. "Tell your manager something for me," he said. "Sure. Tell him to treat people right." Before the cameras roll. 2 weeks passed, and the world kept talking. Podcasts debated it. News anchors replayed it. Schools used it as a case study. And still, Clarence Boone didn't go looking for attention. He went to work, just like he always had. He tightened bolts, hauled steel, drew designs on the back of napkins, showed up early, clocked out late, but the orders kept coming. The calls didn't stop. His website crashed twice in a week. A woman from Brooklyn called just to say, "My father never lived to see someone like you get that kind of respect. I cried watching it. Thank you." A teacher from Ohio said he played the video in his business ethics class. A young man from Birmingham emailed, "I didn't know it was okay to take up space in rooms that weren't built for us until I saw you do it." Clarence read every word. He didn't reply to all, but he read them. And sometimes in the quiet of his garage, he cried. Not because he was weak, because after a lifetime of being invisible, people finally saw him. And more than that, they saw themselves in him. One morning, he stepped out of his truck at the fabrication yard, coffee in one hand, toolbox in the other, and saw someone waiting by the office. It was a teenager, tall, skinny, maybe 17. Clarence squinted. "Can I help you?" The boy straightened. "Nervous. You Mr. Boone, right?" "That's me. I am Jaden, from over on Wilson. I saw your video." Clarence smiled faintly. "You and half the country. I want to work for you." Clarence raised a brow. "I don't need a paycheck. I just want to learn. I've been trying to fix my uncle's bike, and I figured you build stuff." Clarence looked him up and down. The boy's shoes were taped at the sole. His hands were rough but clean. "You any good with tools?" "Not yet." Clarence took a sip of coffee, thought for a moment, then pointed toward the back. "You see that pile of scrap metal?" Jalen turned. "Yeah. Sort by type. Don't cut yourself. If you're still here by lunch, we'll talk." The boy lit up. Didn't even say thank you. Just jogged over and got to work. Clarence watched him go, then walked inside, his lips curling into the kind of smile that comes from quiet hope. Meanwhile, Walter Langston sat in his corporate office 200 miles away, staring at a letter. It was from the board of directors. They wanted to discuss optics. They were polite, corporate, vague. But Walter had been in the game long enough to hear what they weren't saying. He wasn't being reprimanded. He was being warned. There were investors, apparently, who didn't like the message his actions had sent. They were uncomfortable with taking sides. Walter laughed under his breath. Taking sides? A man was humiliated in his own bank for being black, and standing up for him was controversial? He pushed the letter aside, then called his assistant in. "Schedule a full diversity audit across all regional branches," he said. His assistant blinked. "You want to wait for board approval?" Walter didn't even look up. "No, I want it done by Friday." She scribbled it down, jaw tight, but nodded. He leaned back in his chair. If the cost of doing right was ruffling feathers, he was ready to buy a damn bird sanctuary. In the small town where Clarence lived, something else started to change. Other business owners, who had once turned their backs on him, started showing up. Some apologized. Some tried to collaborate. A few tried to ride his wave. He didn't open every door, but he didn't slam them shut either. Because now, he wasn't just a welder. He was an example. Kids from the local high school requested field trips to his shop. A city councilman called and asked if he'd consider running for local office. Clarence chuckled. "I don't wear suits, and I don't lie well." "Exactly. the man replied. But not everyone was celebrating. Alan Prescott had gone quiet. No press, no public statements. His LinkedIn profile vanished overnight. Some said he moved states. Others said he was suing. But Clarence didn't care. He'd already wasted enough time worrying about men like that. He wasn't in the business of revenge. He was building, and not just with steel, but with stories, with second chances, with young men like Jalen, who returned to the yard every day, rain or shine, to learn. Clarence didn't pay him at first, but after 2 weeks, he handed the boy a folded envelope. Jalen opened it wide-eyed. "This for real. You earned it, but I didn't do much." Clarence leaned on a workbench, arms crossed. "You showed up. You listened. You asked questions. That's more than half the people twice your age." Jalen grinned. "I told my mom about you." "Oh yeah." Said you was like Iron Man, but real. Clarence laughed out loud, deep and honest, then handed him a wrench. "Let's see if Iron Man can teach you how to rebuild this carburetor." One evening, Clarence stood outside his shop, locking up when a car pulled in. Black BMW, tinted windows. The door opened, and Walter stepped out. Clarence raised a brow. "Didn't expect you down here." Walter smiled. "Had a meeting nearby. Figured I'd swing by and see how the world's favorite fabricator's doing." They shook hands. Clarence gestured toward the shop. "Come in. You're just in time to see me burn dinner." Inside, they sat at the work table, eating takeout burgers on blueprints and drinking soda from mismatched mugs. Walter looked around. "This place is more alive than most boardrooms I sit in." Clarence leaned back. "It's honest work." Walter nodded. "You ever think about franchising?" Clarence gave him a look. "You trying to turn me into a logo?" Walter smiled. "Just asking." Clarence looked around his space. Oil stains, rusted tools, the sound of a radio crackling in the background. "I don't want to be a brand," he said finally. "I just want to be remembered for doing things the right way." Walter raised his drink. To that, they toasted, two men from different zip codes, tied together by one unshakable truth. Respect has no color, but dignity? Dignity has to be demanded. The sun dipped low behind the trees as Clarence stood on the porch of his mother's house. Same house he'd grown up in. Same creaky steps. Same wind chime by the window. Same porch swing she refused to replace. He held a paper bag with 2 slices of peach cobbler and a small box of her favorite tea. She opened the door before he could knock. "I saw you coming," she said, smiling. Clarence kissed her cheek. "Got your cobbler. And that's why you'll always be my favorite," she grinned. They sat together on the porch, sharing dessert as dusk settled over the neighborhood. His mother rocked gently, spoon in hand. "I heard about the bank," she said, not looking at him. Clarence didn't flinch. Everyone heard. He nodded. "I didn't plan it." She finally looked at him. "I know. That's what makes it matter." He didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I just wanted to open a line of credit. Nothing fancy, just something to get the new equipment." She stirred her tea. "You asked for dignity. That's always been too expensive for some folks to afford." Clarence glanced at her. "You think things you'll change?" She took a sip and stared into the trees. "I think you change him, whether you meant to or not." A week later, Clarence was invited to speak at the local college. The same college that had once overlooked his application when he was 18. This time, they paid him. He stood before a lecture hall full of students, engineers, business majors, future executives. And he said something simple. "Don't just make money, make meaning." They listened, really listened, not because he had letters behind his name, but because he didn't. And yet, he was everything they wanted to be. Meanwhile, the bank where it all began looked very different. A new manager had been appointed. Lisa Caldwell, a sharp, no-nonsense woman known for community work and results. She brought in new training, new expectations, new culture. The waiting area had new posters too, not with stock photos of smiling models, but real customers, real stories. And front and center, a framed quote on the wall. "People don't remember your rules. They remember your respect." See, Boone, it was Lisa's idea. When she asked Clarence's permission to use it, he had simply said, "Only if you mean it." She did. Walter Langston, for his part, took things even further. He began an internal reform campaign across the entire corporation. Not just racial bias training, but systems-wide auditing. No more checkbox solutions. Real change. And it wasn't always welcomed. He lost a few partners, but he gained something else. Legacy. When the board tried to silence him again, he handed in a sealed letter. His retirement, dated 2 years in the future. He told them, "You've got 2 years to learn how to do the right thing without me holding the pen." Back at the fabrication yard, Clarence's world stayed grounded. The sparks still flew. The machines still hummed. But his office had more visitors now. Students, journalists, strangers who just wanted to shake his hand. And one day, a letter arrived from a man he didn't expect. Alan Prescott. It was handwritten. No return address. Just the initials, AP. It read, "I don't expect forgiveness. I barely expect this to be read. But I watched the video. Not the viral one. The full one of you talking about dignity and what it cost. I was wrong. Not just that day. For years. I don't know who I became. But watching you made me remember who I used to want to be. You didn't have to handle it the way you did. But you did. And I'm ashamed it took public disgrace for me to listen. I am sorry. And I hope one day I become someone who deserves to say that without being laughed at." Clarence folded the letter slowly. He didn't smile, didn't tear up, just breathed deeply and whispered under his breath, "That's a start." Months passed. The story drifted out of the headlines. New viral moments came and went. But the impact didn't fade, because something happened that you couldn't track with likes or views. Clarence started getting letters. From young men. From fathers. From little girls who drew pictures of him with a welding torch and wrote, "This is my hero." One day, a man knocked on the shop door. Middle-aged. Nervous. "I saw your story," he said. "I used to run my mouth about people like you. Say it was always about attitude. Or laziness. I taught my son the same lies." Clarence didn't interrupt. The man's voice cracked. "But last week my boy called me out. Told me I was wrong. And I realized he learned it from me." Clarence set down his wrench. The man looked at him, eyes wet. "I just came to say, I'm working on it." Clarence stepped forward and extended his hand. "Then keep working." The final twist? It came not in the form of a headline, not in a corporate memo, but in a moment so small, so quiet, it nearly slipped by unnoticed. Jalen, the boy who once walked in with taped shoes and borrowed courage, stood beside Clarence after finishing his first solo welding project. He'd built a frame from scratch, bent the metal, laid every seam. Clarence inspected it carefully, then nodded. "Solid." Jalen beamed. "I want to be like you." Clarence wiped his hands on a rag. "Don't be like me." Jalen frowned. "Why not?" "Be better," Clarence said. "Be so good. No one ever questions if you belong in the room." The boy stood a little taller after that, because in that garage, under rusted rafters and flickering lights, a legacy was being built. Not from scandal, not from vengeance, but from work, from truth, from quiet strength. The kind that doesn't shout, but still shakes the ground.